Greetings and welcome to another episode of Haunted History with Sherry Brake. That's me. In each episode, we will venture down the not so straight path of the paranormal and dark history, exploring the oddness of life and death, dark and light, evil and goodness. We will cover subjects such as folklore and superstitions, hauntings, cryptids, mythology, the ancient craft, haunted travel, and dark history, of course. This episode focuses on the historic Pink House in Stark County, Ohio, in the historic district of Canal Fulton. Canal Fulton was a sleepy little village until the Ohio and Erie Canal was dug beginning in 1824. The canal cut through this area of Ohio and brought with it industrial goods and travelers through the wilderness. It was basically the ditch that opened up the frontier. This episode features the Pink House, the historic home, just one block from the canal, its history, and its spirits. Before we get into tonight's episode, I want to do a special shout out to Leslie for inviting me to spend the evening in the lovely Pink House. Leslie is the owner and has this property now featured on Airbnb. So if you're interested in spending the night in a building that's got a little bit of haunted history that's in the historic section of Canal Fulton, check it out. It is listed under the historic Pink House in downtown in Canal Fulton, Ohio. Thanks again, Leslie. Hey everybody, I am here at the Pink House tonight and I am reminiscing with my friend Linda.
Hello.
And this is really fun for me to be here at the Pink House, first of all, because way back when you had a business here,
Yes.
it was an amazing place to come into and explore because we were friends.
Yes.
And I met you here when I lived in Canal Fulton and you had this business. You remember what year you started?
It was the year the tornado hit the house. So I want to say
I know it was the
01.
early
I
2000s,
think it was
probably
01.
2001.
Yes.
Because I did not start my haunted walking tours here in Canal Fulton, Ohio until 2002. And I had come in here and I remember coming through this delightful property and you had embroidered t-shirts and goods and toys and teas and chocolates and candles.
Oh
And
yes, lots of candles, lots of teas.
what else did you have here?
Denim shirts. I had a bunch of different vendors that had magnets, and we had lots of recipe books and lots of stuff in the kitchen. And like you said, the tea towels.
Yes.
And those were really popular because we had a local artist design one just for Canal Fulton.
Yeah.
Just for here.
Yeah. And I loved it because, those of you that aren't familiar with Canal Fulton, we're on Canal Street and we're on the historical section of town. So you have a lot of Victorian buildings. You have a lot of gorgeous old-timey looking structures and downtown businesses and private homes. And this had been a private home back in the day of Doc Dissinger and his wives. Three
Wives.
Three wives, right?
Yes.
So when you had this building and you started your business here, did you know about the doctor? I mean, did
No.
you know anything at all?
I just knew that sometimes I would find stuff where it was not left.
Right.
A lot of things, like I would have tea sets and teapots and matching cups and saucers, and they would be in one room towards the front of the house. And when I locked up at night, they were where they were supposed to be. When I came in the morning, they were in the kitchen.
Right. Yeah, because you had the only key.
Right.
So when you closed down your business, you were the first person that came in the next
Right.
day.
Absolutely.
Because I remember you calling me when I lived here in
Yes.
Canal Fulton. You'd be like, you're not going to believe what happened. But, I locked up last night, came in, and there's all these little stuffed animals that are
Yes.
sitting out.
And they were almost like in a circle, like they were having their own little tea party.
Yeah. And then when we decided we were going to bring a psychic in to kind of check out the vibes in the house, and, I knew of a psychic,
Yes.
Laura Lynn, And I did not tell her anything about this house and brought her in because, I was really still skeptic of psychics at that
Yes.
point, not trusting them, not knowing her that well. And then,
Yes, and getting to know her, and she could pinpoint different things and would say, you have a lot of little kid energy around you. Can you feel them? And I'm like, oh, yes.
yeah,
They like to run through the house, just very similar to my own children when they were young, would run through the house. But it was not my children.
right. Right. And kind of unsettling because I know there was a
It
few
was at
times,
first, yes.
yeah, when you called me and you're like, can you come down here for tea? And we'd come down and we'd sit on the front porch and we would talk. And, you and I were just kind of sort of starting to get to know each other. And you knew
Right.
I kind of delved into the paranormal, but you
Yes.
would confide and you would say, I feel good here. I'm calm. I'm not
I
afraid.
never felt afraid of anybody here. I mean,
But
sometimes I would feel like somebody was watching me do the dishes, or somebody was maybe watching while I was vacuuming, or different things like that. Or you'd see a shadow out the corner of your eye, you'd catch something out the window. But it never was unsettling. It was just kind of like, come on in. They just wanted to share the space.
and I think, it's not that it's haunted. It's not that it's haunted. It's
No,
that there's
there's
protective energy,
yes,
maybe a matronly woman, a figure, somebody that kind of wants to check in on what's going on. And maybe she is there with the children
right.
as well and protective.
And I did a lot of baking when I was here too.
I
There was
remember that.
there was always a lot of cookies and pumpkin rolls,
Oh God,
and
the pumpkin rolls.
yes, still
I
do those.
miss those pumpkin rolls. Those were so delicious.
And having a place here that had a stove and an oven, I could work on the Christmas Eve ham when I was here. I had a lot of um, adult type and young adult that would cruise through smelling ham and cooking, and gee, can I have some of this? And there was always a cookie that needed passed around, or
Yeah.
we would hang out on the porch when the weather was nice. And yes, we had a lot of positive feedback from a lot of people that really felt uncomfortable at first until they got to know what was going on here. That it
Right.
was not a scary place at
Never,
all.
never, not at
No.
all. And you were kind enough to let me bring in busloads of
Oh,
people.
yes.
And I remember approaching you like, hey, I'm gonna have a busload of 45 people pulling up out front. Do you mind if we walk into your business? Can you open up? And you would have coffee going and
Yes.
tea, and we would like be in here for 20 minutes. And I'd encourage everybody to buy a candle or buy an embroidered shirt or something like that. And then we would venture into the building and we would walk down into the basement.
Basement.
And the
Yes.
basement was what seemed to draw a lot of people's curiosities out, is when you came into this beautiful pink house and you entered into what was the living room. And of course, you had all kinds of bookcases and shelves and circle racks with
Knickknacks and yes.
everything sitting out. And then we would walk folks through the dining room and we would go down into the basement.
Yes.
And that's where things got kind of freaky.
Yes.
Yeah, because you have the old concrete floor, you have a dirt floor,
It was
you
a dirt
have
floor. There was the beam still had the bark on
right.
the trees from when
Right.
it
The
was built.
joists for the first floor were the big just trees basically with the
Yes.
with the bark on them still. And there was a cistern outside.
Yes.
There was a brick wall, Maslin brick, if I remember
I
correctly, from
think
Maslin,
so. Yes.
Ohio. And then there was this large cutout that you could basically, I don't want to, it's like 3 foot by 3 foot, maybe 3 foot by 4 foot, that you
Hmm.
could actually see the ductwork and you could crawl back in there. And we
Yes.
we did do that one night. I was brave and adventurous enough to go back in there, and I felt like Geraldo Rivera. Do you remember that
Oh,
episode?
yes.
It
What was in the
was
vault?
it was the vault. It was Al Capone.
Hones. Yes.
And I thought, you know what? I'm going to crawl back in the basement of Doc Dissinger's house and I'm going to come out with gold. I'm going to come out with bottles of apple brandy or something like that. And I think we had a photographer there that day because I remember the photographs being taken. And it was nothing but like cobwebs and just
Lots of cobwebs and dirt.
dirt, and didn't go back too far.
Maybe an old empty glass bottle.
Something at the time, but it was still pretty cool to crawl back in there and explore. And I know that, we had Laura Lynn, the psychic, when she had come down to the basement, and I know you were with us and there was a couple ladies from Maslin that came. I don't know if you
Yes.
remember this or not, but we were down in the basement, and Laura had us all gather in one room, and she's like, "I'm feeling the presence of there's a little girl down here, and she's afraid, and she needs to cross over to the other side."
Yes.
And we're all standing there, and I'm kind of skeptic, at the
Yes.
time. I was kind of skeptic at the time, but I had a ghost hunting meter. I had an EMF meter,
Yes.
and the lights were just going crazy. And
And the
Laura's like, "Everybody stand here. Let's concentrate on this little girl going to the light." And I'm still skeptic. I'm still standing there going, whatever. And I think we're looking at each other, locking eyes. And as Laura would speak, my lights would start to dissipate. I mean, they were going from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7. And she's like, "Please go to the light. People are there. They're welcoming you. They want you there. 5, 4, 3, and I'm going, what is going on? Because these meters register energy,
Yes.
and the energy was present. And then as she's speaking, the energy is going away. And as it goes down to 0, she's like, "She's left."
That was amazing.
And as a skeptic, when I was standing there, I'm like, holy shit, what just happened here?
And all the orbs that we would see when we photographed
We
the
did.
rooms.
We had a lot. Of course, there's some dust down there and some dirt and stuff
No.
like that. Yeah, really. But there was some really unusual,
But
brilliant.
There was orbs throughout the house, not just in the basement. There
Yeah.
was in some of the other rooms upstairs because it's a 2-story
So,
building.
yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you about. Is we talked a little bit about the toys and stuff here in the front living room where we're
Yes.
at right now. But when you would go upstairs, was that storage for you?
That was
mostly?
storage for me. Yes. I had like a mattress I had on the floor because when I had the kids here, they were pretty young. And I would get them up in the morning and get them out the door, and you can go over to the pink house and you can take a nap.
Yeah.
So they never felt anything unusual here.
Right. Well, they were probably comforted by
Yes.
everything that was around.
They had no issues with being here. They didn't understand. I didn't go into a lot of detail about scary things or
Yeah.
orbs
Well, you don't want to
or
scare your
no.
kids.
Well, sure we can, but I'd like them to sleep
Now
at
that
night
they're in their
too.
20s,
Yeah.
we can scare
We
them
can
as much
scare
as we
them
want.
now, but back then I liked them to sleep at night.
Right.
So, but they never really felt anything unusual here. Sometimes they would, oh, I heard, I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck. That was your brother.
Right.
He's playing games and stuff, but the kids were always comfortable here and they really enjoyed being here.
Yeah. It was such a welcoming home. And I'm trying to remember when I was here, when you were here, when your business was here, upstairs was just basically, it was just storage.
Yes, there
I
was
don't
3
think-
rooms of storage.
Yeah.
And as you
Yeah.
walked up the steps, there was brick exposed that must have been, I heard that there might have been up to 4 fireplaces in the house.
Yes.
Never found any. I didn't go opening up walls to look for them, but there was exposed brick and there was some really fun hiding places too for
Oh,
small people.
I'm sure a
Yes.
house like this just kind of beckons you into the
Oh,
shadows. And,
yes.
Oh,
But yes, we had a fully functioning kitchen, and like I say, I would cook, bake, do dishes, and sometimes you'd feel somebody maybe looking over your
yeah.
shoulder.
Well, speaking
But
of
it was never scary.
it wasn't scary at all. And speaking of the kitchen, I remember reading in it was a book that I believe the Rogues Hollow Historical Society in Wayne County had put out, and there was a story in there about Doc Dissinger, and it talked
Yes.
about him doing his autopsies in the kitchen.
Yes.
So back where, the refrigerator, the stove, all that was at, I mean, was there ever anything in the kitchen area?
I don't
other
know
than-
that he did stuff there. They had a summer kitchen
Mhm.
that was a
Out behind.
building that was not here when I had it, that was detached, that they would do their cooking in and stuff. And I think maybe he performed more investigative things there rather
Yeah.
than maybe in the actual house.
Itself.
Because
right.
who knows which number of wife or which kid was running around, or
Right.
maybe
Well,
we didn't want to have anybody just kind of walking in on.
he did have 3 wives.
Yes, well,
Yeah. So, I've been working on this Haunted Canal Fulton, Ohio book for a while and focusing on Doc Dissinger, who lived here. And, I keep coming up with these names. What am I going to call this chapter about Doc Dissinger? And it's like,
you could probably do almost a whole book
good,
on just
probably
on him.
but it's like good doctor, bad husband
Yes.
is pretty much that with, trying to poison your second wife. I mean,
Yeah, not the best
that's-
of marriage material, but
not really, but Anyway, it's been so nice to have you here at the
Well,
Pink
thank you. This
House.
has been a real treat to come back and
I
see
know
how it's been so well taken care of.
it's beautiful, and now as an Airbnb,
Yes.
it's an amazing place to come, and I'm so thankful that I'm able to be here tonight, and to have you here, and to think of all the times that we sat out in that front
Oh
porch
my
swing.
gosh, that front porch could tell tales.
I think these walls could tell
Yes,
tales.
I'm sure.
So I'm gonna leave it at that.
Okay,
Thank you
sounds
for being
perfect.
here
Thank you
tonight.
for having me.
It's been wonderful. I've been leading my haunted history walking tours in Canal Fulton for 20 years now. And one of the stops on my walking tour is in the front yard of a little building located at 118 Canal Street, the Pink House. So let's go back in time a little bit and talk about the history before we get into the ghost stories. So the land grant was issued for this building in 1805. The house was built in 1842. Several additions have been made. Several owners have occupied. There was a Dr. Houts who owned and occupied this building. And then in 1879, Dr. Hiram Dissinger. He lived here until his death, and then Mr. Clyde Gainey purchased it in 1947. So the home is basically a 2-story historic property sitting back from the road just a little bit. It's very quaint. It's just bathed in Victorian colors and a beautiful pink color. And the front porch kind of beckons you to walk up the pathway and sit on the swing and feel the energy of this house. And I've done it for many years over the years that my walking tour came here. And back in the early 2000s, it was a business. It was a business that was called The Trip in Time. And a friend of mine, Linda, was the owner of that business. And we're going to have her on a little bit to share some of her stories. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about Doc Dissinger, as he is one of the most interesting characters that lived here in this building. Now, the good doctor, he was a good doctor, had 3 wives. And unfortunately, his second wife made the news quite a bit, as she was suing him for divorce. Now, hearing the legends and the folklore and the urban legends surrounding the good doctor and his wife is one thing, but to come across actual newspaper documentation is something else. And his divorce was sensational. It even made the Columbus News over 100 miles away. So here we have one article in the Columbus Dispatch, and the title of it is "Matrimonial Troubles Are Numerous. Doc Dissinger of Canal Fulton Again in Trouble with Wife." In a divorce petition filed Tuesday, Mrs. Delilah Dissinger, wife of Dr. Hiram Dissinger of Canal Fulton, Ohio, says that her husband last Saturday drew a revolver on her, that he dragged her from the house and threw her down the steps and kicked her. She charges that he then followed her to the post office and struck her over the head with his revolver. Mrs. Dissinger also charges that her husband took her to an attorney's office where deeds had been prepared and, flourishing a revolver, compelled her to sign away her interest in his property. Dr. Dissinger is said to own $10,000 worth of property. This is the doctor's 3rd matrimonial venture, and all have proven stormy. Mrs. Dissinger's maiden name was Davidson, and she is a niece of Mr. M. R. Zell. So this was the 3rd wife, Delilah. If we go back to his 2nd wife, Caroline, we have this again in the dispatch. An Ohio husband. The long array of charges preferred in a divorce suit. Special telegram to the Columbus Dispatch. January 12th, Caroline B. Dissinger, wife of Hiram Dissinger, a prominent Canal Fulton physician, well known in northern Ohio, brought suit for divorce in this city today, Akron now being her residence. She alleges neglect, cruelty, and unfaithfulness. She says that when she lay ill last summer, her husband refused at first to attend her, and that when he did prescribe for her, he administered, intentionally or carelessly, a deadly poison from which she would have died but for the timely efforts of other physicians who were called to. She also involves a well known young woman, Mrs. Lambright, in the charges, which are highly sensational. So, this is a big to do in the early 1900s. Not only do we have that newspaper article, but we also have another focusing on the good doctor. Good doctor, bad husband, I'm thinking. So the headlines read, "A Canal Fulton Sensation. Mrs. Dissinger mysteriously poisoned." A special to the Columbus Dispatch from Canal Fulton says, sometime before Mrs. Dr. Hiram Dissinger was taken ill, and as was her custom, drank some wine to relieve her pains. Her own supply of wine being exhausted, she asked the doctor, her husband, to give her a quantity from his stock. Shortly after making the request, Mrs. Dissinger went to her husband's office and, seeing a bottle labeled wine, thought it had been placed there for her. She drank a quantity of the wine and was soon taken violently ill, exhibiting symptoms of having been poisoned. The doctor stated that the bottle contained a poisonous mixture which he had been preparing for a local barber. He stated that the bottle was on the top shelf in his medicine case, but the wife said it was on the table. Several days later, while taking her medicine, Mrs. Dissinger noticed that one of her powders did not taste like the others and remarked on the fact. At once, she was giving a medication to make her vomit, and the medicine was thrown from her stomach. Another powder was found which did not correspond with the medicine prescribed. This was sent to Cleveland for analysis and was found to be, and I'll quote, rank poison. Since that time, the greatest care has been taken. Things that were prepared for her were taken at once to her room, while the nurses carried her medicine in their pockets. Further mishaps were in this way prevented, and on Saturday last, the lady was removed to the home of her father, Adam Sisler, in Manchester, about 4 miles from this place. The lady is still severely ill, and great care must be exercised to ensure her recovery. There is a great deal of quiet feeling in the town of Canal Fulton, and many have been surmised as to the origin of the mystery. Here we have evidence of a good doctor, but a bad husband. All right, so we've probably established the fact that Doc Dissinger wasn't the best of husbands, but he was a good doctor. He was the town doctor here in Canal Fulton. He would pull teeth, he would set bones, he would deliver babies, he would help with whatever medical emergency that there was taking place. Not only would he do home visits, but he would also invite people into his home where he also operated his office. I've found some documents with my research over the years talking about cases where he would bring bodies back to his home and he would perform autopsies on them in his home. One most notable case was documented in a book that was written on Rogues Hollow, which is located in Doylestown, Wayne County, Ohio. And it talked of a young boy that Doc Dissinger tended to who became ill, and the boy passed away. Doc Dissinger asked the family if he could do an autopsy on this young boy, and they told him no. So Doc decided, with the help of his assistant, his brother in law, to go over to the Rogues Hollow area where this boy had been buried, dig up this boy, and bring him back and do an autopsy here at the house. So you have to remember, this was back in the days before there were really any laws about digging up dead bodies. And I think back to even medieval days, 19th century, even 18th century, even when gravediggers or the resurrectionists would be paid to go back out and dig up these freshly buried bodies and bring them to doctors so that doctors could study the human body, or even to a local medical college. And of course, this is where we get the term skeleton in the closet. You would be paid for each body. The fresher the body, the more that you would be paid. So these resurrectionists or these grave robbers would often be looked down upon, of course, because you're digging up loved ones' bodies. But then again, this is the way that, a medical college or a doctor would gain knowledge about the human body. As grotesque and as morbid as it sounds, it was a necessity back in the day. Let's go ahead and move past the fact that Doc Dissinger exhumed bodies and did his own autopsies on these souls. Let's move ahead to the early 2000s and some of the unusual activity that took place here in the Pink House. Now, as an investigator, anytime I get a chance to do a paranormal investigation or research a historic property, I love it. And the chance to do my first investigation here at the Pink House was in the early 2000s. Needless to say, we had some unusual things happen in the building. I had heard stories of shadow people, of cabinet doors opening on their own, of the sound of children running around inside on the first level and up and down the staircase. And of course, a lot of this you blow away. You just kind of think, well, it's an old house. You're going to hear sounds like that. It sits in a busy historic area. Could be the outside noise of somebody passing by that you hear. But then again, maybe not. I hope that you've enjoyed this little episode of Haunted History with me, Sherry Brake. If you're interested in my events, programs, ghost tours, and international tours to Ireland and Scotland, check out my website at www.hauntedhistory.net. I am on Instagram as Riverstix, RIVERSTX, and I've got various Facebook pages under Sherry Brake or Haunted Heartland Tours, or even the names of my books. So I've been investigating the paranormal and researching all things odd and intriguing for over 30 years. My love for the paranormal has resulted in over 20 books being published. I own Haunted Heartland Tours, and I'm thrilled to be celebrating 20 years. I definitely want to give a shout out to Leslie, the owner of the historic Pink House here in downtown Canal Fulton, Ohio. This house is on Airbnb. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It has a haunted history. You can look it up on Airbnb under Historic Pink House in downtown Canal Fulton, Ohio. So thank you, Leslie, for letting me spend the night in this beautiful building. I have always felt intrigued. I have always felt at home here. And I've always been just fascinated by the spirits that seem to roam around this quaint little pink building. So once again, you guys, thanks so much for supporting my podcast and tuning in. I love to share my insight and my stories and my love of this crazy, dark, twisted, intriguing subject that we call haunted history. Ghost stories don't need to be made up because history is frightening enough. Don't you agree? Until we meet again, hope to see you on the Haunted Highway.